The midday sun was blazing at its zenith when the meeting was called at the city's largest community centre. Sunlight shimmered on the leaves of the surrounding trees, and the smell of dust inside the hall had settled into the air. Today, two great families, the Smiths and the Johnsons, sat facing each other. The atmosphere was thick with tension. A sense of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Local leaders, town elders, and common citizens were present to witness this decision alongside the families. A carpet was spread in the centre of the hall, separating the two groups. On the Smith side, Michael Smith sat in a white shirt and trousers, a cap on his head, his face etched with defeat. Beside him sat his eldest son. Samuel Smith, the accused murderer, eyes cast down in silence. On the other side sat the Johnsons, their eyes burning with grief and rage, silent but with expressions as hard as stone. Henry Johnson, dressed in a black shirt and trousers, sat tall. His broad shoulders, tense muscles, and athletic frame carried a shadow of deep melancholy. His eyes, reflecting profound sorrow, were fixed on the Smith family. The meeting was presided over by an old man known as the town elder. Stroking his white beard, he took a deep breath and spoke. "Michael Smith, your son is a killer. Do you wish to pay blood money, or are you ready to accept the punishment?" Michael Smith's voice trembled. "We are ready to pay blood money, sir. Whatever amount you name, we will pay." Hearing this, Henry Johnson's patience snapped. He slammed his hand on the table with full force and stood up, the sound echoing through the hall. "My brother's blood isn't that cheap, Michael Smith." His voice thundered like a storm. "You think I'd trade my little brother's blood for money? How is that even possible?" Dead silence fell over the meeting. Everyone's eyes were glued to Henry. His fists were clenched, his eyes red, and his voice held the calm before a massive storm. "I don't want money, Michael Smith." Henry stepped forward, standing right in front of Michael, and spoke sternly. "I want Lara." The entire hall gasped. For a few moments, only the rustling of the wind could be heard. Michael Smith's face turned ice cold. Samuel Smith looked up for the first time but immediately looked down again, as if cursing himself. "This is cruelty!" Michael Smith stood up, practically begging, clasping his hands together in front of Henry. "For God's sake, have mercy on my family's honour. My daughter is still very young." Henry Johnson's face showed no softness. He stood like a statue, devoid of emotion. Yet the sadness in his eyes was deepening, as if a war was waging inside him. He was a Johnson, a man who considered women the crown of his head, but this time he had dragged a woman into the middle of this feud. The town elder tried to reason with him in a serious tone. "Henry, don't burn in the fire of revenge. It will yield no good. Blood will only beget blood. This cycle will never end." Henry looked at the town elder, then cast his gaze toward the sky as if searching for an unknown verdict, but the hardness remained on his lips. "The decision is mine, sir." Henry's voice was final. "I want Lara, or else." Everyone in the hall held their breath. On one side sat the wounded Smith family. On the other stood the Johnson family, an unyielding mountain. The decision was pending. But one thing was certain. This matter wouldn't end easily. This worried the townspeople, for they knew if this war didn't end here, it would spell trouble for the whole city. Silence reigned for a few moments. The town elder sat in the middle, looking at both families with deep intent. "Henry!" his voice boomed. "I tried to reason with you. You didn't listen. I tried to stop you. You didn't stop. Now the decision will be what the law dictates." Henry Johnson raised his eyes to the elder. They held a coldness like ice. "I have already announced my decision, sir. I want Lara." The town elder took a deep breath and looked over the crowd. When one family is begging for forgiveness and ready to pay blood money, and the other is insistent on revenge, justice demands that both rights be balanced. Michael Smith looked at the elder helplessly, as if the last ray of hope was fading. "Michael Smith!" the elder's voice boomed again. "Your property could be confiscated. You could be exiled from the city if you do not accept the decision of this meeting." A wave of anxiety ran through the Smith family. Stifled sobs from the women were heard. The men's faces turned pale. Sweat glistened on Michael Smith's forehead, and his hands began to shake. "This is oppression, sir!" Michael Smith's voice quivered. "My daughter! She is too young. How can she—" "The meeting has decided," the town elder said firmly. "If you want to save lives, save honor, you must accept this marriage. The Johnson family lost a child. You must sacrifice yours too. That is the demand of justice." There were murmurs among the Smith men, but no one dared to go against the meeting's ruling. The Johnson name was too powerful in the city. Opposing them meant losing land, honor, and identity. Henry Johnson, his fists already clenched tight, straightened up and scanned the Smith family rows with his dark eyes. "Where is Lara Smith?" His voice held no softness, no emotion. It was as if he were simply announcing a verdict. Finalizing a deal. Chaos erupted among the Smith women. Some buried their faces in their hands, weeping. Others gathered helplessly around Michael Smith. Tears filled Michael's eyes. He looked at the council one last time. But the judgment had been passed. Bring Lara. It wasn't a decision. It was a cruelty inflicted upon an innocent life, but no one understood this. In everyone's eyes, a murder had occurred and the Smiths had committed it. No one realized that Samuel Smith had committed the murder, not the entire family. The daylight was at its peak, yet a deep silence blanketed the community center. Moments later, there was a stir. From among the veiled women, a frail girl appeared, dressed in black, a scarf covering her head. Her steps faltered, her eyes were cast down, and her face was pale with sheer terror. Her mother and aunt supported her on either side, bringing her into the hall. She trembled with every step, wishing the earth would split open and swallow her whole. She had never imagined she would be brought into a packed meeting like this. Goosebumps rose on her skin. Space was made for her beside Michael Smith. As she sat, she seemed to shrink into herself. Her slender fingers gripped her scarf tightly, her eyelashes trembling. She was Lara Smith, the darling of her father and brothers. But today, because of one brother, she stood at a crossroads where she was being forced into this marriage. This marriage wasn't just a word. It was a calamity passing over a girl. On the other side, Henry Johnson sat waiting. In his black shirt and trousers, his face showed no emotion. Neither softness nor harshness, just a traditional stoicism. As if this marriage was merely a task to be completed. The priest began the ceremony. Every word felt like a burden on the entire hall. "Lara Smith, daughter of Michael Smith, do you accept this marriage?" Lara's body trembled. Her lips quivered, but no voice came out. Tears streamed from her lashes, soaking into her scarf. Her mother placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, but Lara felt her heart stopping. "I accept." Her voice was so faint it seemed to dissolve in the air. "Lara Smith, daughter of Michael Smith, do you accept this marriage?" This time a sob joined the tears. She could barely breathe. "I accept." The voice was wet, defeated, and filled with utter helplessness. "Lara Smith, daughter of Michael Smith, do you accept this marriage?" This time, she closed her weeping eyes, gathered all her courage, and said, "I accept." The priest looked to the other side where Henry Johnson sat. The same traditional seriousness, the same hardness, the same silence. "Henry Johnson, son of Zulfikar Johnson, do you accept this marriage?" Henry took a deep breath. No expression surfaced on his face. Then, in a strong voice, he said, "I accept." The question was repeated 3 times, and 3 times the answer came with the same gravity, without hesitation, without faltering, as if the decision had been made long ago. The priest raised his hands for prayer, and the sound of stifled sobs came from the women behind. Lara's world had changed, but she couldn't accept this reality. The marriage was barely complete when Michael Smith tried to say something. But Henry Johnson seemed ready. He stood up immediately, and the crowd went still again. Henry stepped forward without a second's delay, grabbed Lara's delicate wrist, and pulled her to her feet with a jerk. She gasped. Immense fear rose in her eyes, but resistance was meaningless. Henry looked at Michael Smith, a deep, cold, undeniable gaze. "It would be best if you kept no contact with us." His voice had that same icy chill. Consider this girl dead. She belongs solely to our family now. Your safety lies in this. Otherwise, I will give your son a death that your next 7 generations will remember." Saying this, he didn't pause for a second. He didn't stop to hear a reply. Lara tried helplessly to free her wrist, but his grip was like iron. He walked fast, practically dragging her toward the car. Behind them, deep shadows of helplessness lingered in Michael Smith's eyes. There were women's screams and people sitting on the ground, silent witnesses to this cruelty. The car door slammed shut, and in the next moment, it was speeding down the city road, kicking up dust, separating a girl from her past forever. But he didn't know that the girl he was taking with him, though innocent in appearance, was a dangerous rebel on the inside. The way he had shoved her in caused her head to nearly hit the dashboard. The car was speeding toward the mansion when Lara screamed in anger. "What is this behavior?" She straightened up, glaring at Henry furiously. Henry Johnson, who had slammed the door and taken the driving seat, paused for a second. He looked up in surprise. Just a while ago. This girl sat silent in the meeting. How did she find her voice now? He was baffled. "Why did you push me like that? Who do you think you are?" She screamed with full force. Sparks of anger burned in her large eyes. Inside, Lara had awakened. Her pride couldn't tolerate the insult. A vein in Henry's forehead pulsed. He grabbed her arm in a jerk, looking at her with a hard expression. "Shut up!" Lara narrowed her eyes at him, as if she couldn't believe someone could silence her. "Why should I shut up? Tell me, what crime have I committed? My brother committed the murder, so why am I paying the price?" She wrenched her arm free as she spoke, while he stared at her running tongue in amazement. Henry gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw set hard. He couldn't imagine a girl who would question his decision, who spoke so fearlessly. "Be quiet!" he roared, increasing the car's speed. He didn't believe in raising a hand against a woman. His plan was to hand Lara over to his mother, but this girl was making his blood boil for no reason. Lara laughed, looking at him as if enjoying his helplessness. "Yes, silence me. That's all a man like you can do. Masculinity is only visible in giving orders, right?" Henry's eyes turned red. He stopped the car for a moment, slammed his fist on the dashboard, and spoke in a cold tone. "Enough, girl! Be quiet! Don't test my patience! You're very eager to awaken my masculinity? I'll show you at home what masculinity really is." He thought she would be terrified into silence, but that was just his misconception. Yeah, that's all one can expect from a man like you. Half-brained people with no sense or reason. Someone else made the mistake. And I'm getting punished. What can you do? You'll imprison me, hit me, or rip my tongue out just to soothe your ego? She laughed sarcastically and sat back stiffly in her seat. Henry didn't even deign to look at her. He just pressed his lips together in rage and drove on. Other cars were following behind in a cloud of dust. The Johnson men were heading to the mansion to implement the decision, but no one knew they were transporting not just a girl, but a calamity, one the entire Smith family sought refuge from. Silence reigned in the car, but it wasn't the silence Henry wanted. It was the calm before the storm. The lights of the mansion appeared in the distance. And as the car stopped in the porch, Lara crossed her arms and glared at Henry, as if plotting a new scene. Henry opened the door, stepped out, and spoke harshly, "Get out!" Lara leaned back against the seat nonchalantly, crossed her legs, and said with disdain, "Why? I didn't want to come here. You brought me by force. Now carry me out yourself." She was provoking him unnecessarily, and that was her habit. Annoy the other person until they are forced to bang their head against a wall. Lines of anger emerged on Henry's forehead. He turned, opened her door, and looked at her with hard eyes. "I'm saying this for the last time. Get out yourself, or I will drag you out." Lara blinked and tossed her head. "You only ever give threats. Can you do anything new? Or do you just get happy making a scene?" She was angering him on purpose. This was part of her plan. Henry's patience ran out. He grabbed her wrist in one swift motion and pulled with full force. "Let go! What is this insolence?" she screamed. But Henry didn't care. He had dragged her out of the car. It would be better if you got it into your head that you belong to no one else now. Only me. Henry's voice was unraveling, like a predator who had captured its prey. And it would be better if this stays in your mind. I don't let my possessions get to my head. Instead, anything that harms me, I break it and throw it away. Lara tried her best to free her wrist, but the grip was so strong she shouted helplessly, "Do people like you know anything other than force? Do you think I'll be scared?" Henry looked at her with bloodshot eyes. He leaned a step toward her and roared, "If your tongue runs now, I will rip it out and feed it to the dogs." Hearing this threat, Lara stood frozen for a moment. She forgot to breathe. Her eyes widened with a mix of shock and fear. For the first time, she felt fear of Henry Johnson. His grip was tight. His face was a portrait of severity and oppression. "Now walk," he growled, dragging her toward the mansion doors. Lara's tongue had stopped, but her eyes held a spark, as if she was still looking for an opportunity. But for the first time, she realized this man was truly dangerous. And silence might be the better path here. But as they say, you can't silence those with rebellion in their nature. Such was the case with Lara Smith. The mansion door flew open with a bang, and Henry Johnson dragged Lara inside mercilessly. Julia Johnson sat in the hall with grandeur, surrounded by other family members. The next moment, Henry shoved Lara with all his might, and she lost her balance, falling right at Julia Johnson's feet. Her head nearly hit a nearby table, but she managed to catch herself at the last second. Henry's voice was hard and ruthless. "Here is your criminal, the daughter of the family that killed your son. Finish her. Do whatever you want with her now." Lara's breathing became erratic, but she was no coward. She was Lara Smith. Her father and brothers had taught her to stand tall in every fight. The next moment she snapped up, dusted off her clothes, and glared at Julia Johnson. "How can you do anything to me? Am I a toy to be broken, or a Barbie doll to be twisted however you want?" Her tone was sharp and rebellious. Her eyes shone with stubbornness and self-respect. Silence fell over the hall. Everyone looked at her with narrow eyes. How did this girl who had just come into this forced marriage dare to speak like this? Henry glared at her. How had he forgotten that she started speaking the moment the marriage was over? How would she be silent here? Lara took a step forward and shouted angrily, "I may have been forced into this marriage, but I won't do anything. My brother committed the murder. Punish him. Why am I being made the scapegoat?" She was just like that, fighting for her rights. Henry's patience had run out. He lunged to silence her, but Lara immediately stepped back. He moved toward her again, but at that moment, Julia Johnson stood up from her chair. "Stop, Henry!" Her command struck like lightning. Redness rushed into Henry's eyes. He clenched his fists, but said nothing before his mother's order. Julia Johnson called a servant. "Take her to Henry's room." Lara narrowed her eyes at her. "I'm not going anywhere." Julia Johnson glared at her sharply. "You don't have the right to make that decision." This time, she spoke so sternly that Lara fell silent. She couldn't be rude to this woman even if she wanted to. Henry looked at his mother in anger. "No, I'll fix her attitude right now. This girl has a very long tongue." "Be quiet, Henry," Julia Johnson said decisively. Henry pressed his lips together, but the storm inside him burned in his eyes. The servant glared at Lara and said, "Move!" Lara shot Henry one last sharp look, as if challenging him. "Do what you want. I won't fall into your hands," and then walked quickly toward the room. Henry wanted nothing more than to wring the girl's neck, but before his mother, he was helpless. He wanted to keep his mother who was going through such grief in high regard to comfort her heart. That was why, despite his anger, he didn't move an inch. When Lara disappeared from view, Julia Johnson stepped forward. She gently took Henry's wrist and, without saying a word, walked straight toward her room. The flush of anger was still on Henry's face, but he walked with his mother. His heart and mind were close to bursting with rage, but his mother's touch alone normalized him to a great extent. Reaching the room, Julia Johnson closed the door, took a deep breath, and turned to him. "Sit, Henry." Her tone was firm. Henry gritted his teeth and shook his head. "Mom, if you're gonna lecture me, don't! I've made my decision. This girl won't escape my hands. I had no intention of raising a hand against her. But she wants to be treated badly. What a sharp tongue she has. Julia Johnson's eyes held a strange calm, as if she saw his anger but was ignoring it. Henry, if we punish someone's daughter today, tomorrow our daughter is here too. Sarah is in our home. No one can escape the cycle of karma. Henry's jaw tightened. He stood up angrily and began pacing the room. This is all nonsense, Mom. When I saw my brother drenched in blood, no one remembered karma then. When he died in agony, why did no one think of justice? Julia Johnson calmly pointed to the Bible kept by her pillow. The Bible says oppressing the innocent is the greatest sin, Henry. The one who killed should get the punishment. These are just senseless customs that have continued for centuries. If we do exactly what the oppressors do, what difference remains between us and them? Henry's fist clenched. Blood rushed to his eyes. These are just bookish words, Mom. When they suffer, then they'll know what blood revenge is. Julia Johnson placed a hand on his shoulder and looked at him deeply. Henry, we are not tyrants. We are the victims, and the revenge of the victim is not oppression. If you raise a hand against an innocent person today, remember, that hand will be at your own throat tomorrow. God will bless you with a daughter too. When your daughter faces the same treatment you want to inflict on someone else's daughter, how will you feel? Henry's breathing became erratic. There was such peace in his mother's words that it cooled the heat of his anger. He fell silent for a moment, searching for words but couldn't say anything. Julia Johnson spoke softly. Henry, we are Johnsons. We are powerful, but power doesn't mean cruelty. Your father never did injustice to an innocent person and left this world in peace and comfort. I want to leave in peace and comfort too. And I intend the same for you. The best person in the eyes of God is the one who shows mercy to his people. It would be better to forgive. I was telling you this before. But now that you've brought their daughter here, treat her with kindness, because today she is your sister. Tomorrow, your daughter will be in her place. Confusion clouded Henry's eyes. The anger was slowly dissolving. He took a deep breath and listened to his mother silently. She was absolutely right. He realized this, even when he made the decision for this marriage. His heart had wavered, but he had gone mad in the fire of rage. As soon as she entered the room, Lara slammed the door shut and stomped to the middle of the room, standing there fuming. Her face was flushed with anger. Her breathing was ragged. Tears trembled in her eyes. "What misery has fallen upon me?" she shouted, and the next moment she sat helplessly on the bed. She wanted to scream to the whole world that she was innocent. She had been forced into this marriage. It wasn't her fault. Yet she was being punished. She sat gripping her hair with both hands. As she lowered her head, tears involuntarily spilled from her eyes. This is all because of my brother. He committed the murder and I'm getting the punishment. My beautiful, comfortable, safe home was taken away and I've been shoved into this hell. She began to weep with the intensity of her grief. She was Lara Smith. She used to remind others of their place. But today, she was caught in such a torment that she couldn't stop her tears even if she wanted to. She stood up in anger and paced the room, sometimes going to the window, sometimes looking at the door. Helplessness was driving her mad. "No, I can't tolerate this. I won't sit here and become a scapegoat." In this fit of rage, she picked up the pillows from the bed and threw them on the floor. She yanked the quilt off and threw it on the ground. "I won't stay in this tyrant Henry Johnson's prison. I will run away. Yes, that's the right thing to do." As she thought this, a spark appeared in her eyes. Thinking quickly, she took the bedsheet. Tying one end to the window, she let the sheet hang down outside. She wanted to mislead them, to take advantage of the distraction, sneak out of the mansion, and run far away to another city. Quickly, she picked up the fallen pillows. This time, she arranged them neatly on the bed. She stacked the pillows on top of each other and covered them with the quilt, making it look like she was sleeping wrapped up in them. She did this deliberately to confuse anyone who entered. Then she quietly slid under the bed. Her heart was pounding loudly. "Just wait for a chance and I'll escape this prison." She laughed quietly in the dark. Henry Johnson, you think you've imprisoned me, but in reality, I cannot be controlled by you. I am Lara, whom my father couldn't understand. What will you understand? Lara's heart raced. Her eyes held a challenge. And her mind held a plan for escape. Time passed slowly. About an hour later, Henry Johnson pushed the door open and entered. The silence in the room agitated him further. His eyes went straight to the bed where something wrapped in the quilt lay, as if sleeping peacefully. His jaw clenched in anger. He took long strides toward the bed, wildness in his eyes, and a frown on his forehead. Stop the sleeping act. Do you think I'll spare you? His heavy voice echoed in the room. But there was no movement. Henry laughed bitterly. You will face exactly what your brother did to my brother. Saying this, he yanked the quilt off in one motion, and for a moment time seemed to stop. Only pillows lay on the bed. The quilt had been wrapped around them. His eyes narrowed in surprise for a second. Then he turned angrily toward the window. The shutters were open, and the sheet was swaying gently outside as if someone had just used it. Damn it! He growled through gritted teeth. He lunged for the door and shouted with full force, Guards, lock the doors! She escaped! Hearing his order, chaos erupted outside. Henry threw the door open, stepped out, but stopped immediately. He paused for a moment, startled. He felt something strange. He thought for a second, glanced toward the space under the bed, and then a faint smile spread across his lips. After his brother's death, he smiled for the first time. Step by step, he walked calmly to the sofa and sat down. He was a Johnson. He recognized her scent in an instant. He pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and blew smoke rings into the air. His gaze remained fixed, right where he knew Lara was hiding. She was quietly lying under the bed. Even the sound of her shallow breathing was reaching Henry's ears. A deep silence filled the room. Outside, sounds of running and shouting continued. Henry's guards were searching the entire mansion, while he sat comfortably in the cigarette smoke, waiting for his prey. After a while, when the noise outside slowly died down, Lara, hiding under the bed, held her breath and slowly poked her head out. She quickly looked left and right, and when she felt the coast was clear, she immediately crawled out from under the bed. But as soon as she straightened up, her eyes met the person sitting on the sofa, and she turned to stone. Henry Johnson sat calmly with one leg crossed over the other. A cigarette in one hand, the fingers of the other hand tapping slowly on the armrest. His gaze was fixed straight on Lara, and a faint, triumphant smile played on his lips. Nice act, wifey. He spoke softly. Eyes wild. Don't make the mistake of trying to fool me. I am 4 steps ahead of you. Lara's breath hitched. She had hidden under the bed with a plan to escape, but here the hunter had already caught the prey in the net. A mocking smile appeared on Henry Johnson's lips. He calmly took another drag of the cigarette, stood up, and looking at Lara intensely, said, Done with your desire to escape? Your brain works too much. Doesn't it? Lara puffed out her cheeks. She averted her gaze angrily, but remained silent. Displeasure was evident on her face, but she wasn't in the mood to reply. Henry laughed again at her silence and moved away from the sofa, saying, Come here! Lara narrowed her eyes at him, assessing if he was serious or just joking. Then she said, and turned aside as if she hadn't heard. Henry's smile deepened. Okay, so you won't come. He spoke in a low tone, but the warning colours in his eyes were clear. Lara pursed her lips and tossed her head, turning away. Fine. Henry took a step from his place and slowly walked toward her. Seeing him coming, Lara involuntarily started backing away. Her heart began to pound, but she kept a look of annoyance on her face. Henry grabbed her arm in a swift motion. If you want me not to do anything to you, learn to live like a human being. Here. His voice was calm, but the tone held a dangerous threat. Lara tried to jerk her arm free but failed. She gritted her teeth and said, Why? Why should I live like a human being? My choice. I'll live however I want. Henry looked into her eyes with a venomous smile. Oh, so you think you'll live here according to your own will? Lara turned her face away in disdain. Henry's grip tightened and he spoke through gritted teeth. "Stay in your senses, Lara. If my mother or sister feel even a speck of grief because of you, I will take your life." A glimpse of fear appeared in Lara's eyes for the first time, but she quickly composed herself. "Now listen to one thing." Henry moved closer, speaking sternly. "This room is your limit. There is no need to go outside it. If you make any move that brings shame to my family, remember, I know very well how to fix the brains of girls like you." Lara glared at him furiously, but couldn't say anything. Henry looked at her one last time as if looking at a prisoner. Then nonchalantly, he let go of her arm and walked to the door. Pausing at the door, he cast a glance back where Lara stood, glaring at him as if she would blow his head off with her eyes alone. A bitter smile appeared on Henry's lips again. "This is just the beginning, wifey." Saying this, he slammed the door shut and left, while Lara was left standing in anger and helplessness. What kind of trial was this? She couldn't understand anything. Since childhood, she had only seen love and pampering. But now, moment by moment, she was being made to feel that she was just a girl brought into a forced marriage with no status. Her heart began to weep tears of blood. But what could she do? This was now part of her life. Time passed slowly. She spent the entire night in a state of restless sleep. Hunger was doubling her misery. But what could she do? She was in a stranger's house. She couldn't take any step that would bring her disrepute. The soft rays of morning were filtering through the curtains, but Lara was already awake. The bitterness of the night was fresh in her mind. But right now, the intensity of hunger pangs was the most overpowering feeling. She tossed and turned restlessly, but when the hunger became unbearable, she got out of bed and opened the door to leave the room. There was a light hustle and bustle in the mansion hallway, but she decided to go down the stairs without caring about anyone. Coming down, her eyes fell on the kitchen in front from where wafts of delicious smells were coming. Subconsciously, she moved in that direction. As she entered the kitchen, her steps halted involuntarily. Julia Johnson and her daughter Sarah were making breakfast. Sarah was flipping pancakes while Julia Johnson was pouring cups of coffee. Both mother and daughter looked so simple and sincere that Lara's heart was instantly filled with remorse. As soon as they saw her enter, they looked at her in surprise. Lara cleared her throat slightly and said hesitantly, I'm feeling hungry. I haven't eaten since yesterday." She felt a strange shame. Julia Johnson looked at her for a moment, then smiled slightly and nodded. "Sit, I'll arrange the food," she spoke simply. Lara thought she would scold her, but her guess was wrong. Sarah immediately put breakfast on a plate and quietly placed it in front of her. There was no hardness or arrogance in her eyes, just pure simplicity. Lara sat down slowly. She was so headstrong and sharp-tongued, but today, for the first time, she felt the bitterness of her own words. Last night she had been very rude to Julia Johnson, and today, that same woman was gently placing breakfast for her without a single bitter sentence. For a few moments, she stared at the plate, then began to eat quietly. The hot pancakes and eggs felt like the most delicious thing in the world right now. Sarah got busy with work, while Julia Johnson took a cup of coffee and sat near her. Lara lowered her eyes. She wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. A few moments passed in silence. Then she spoke in a soft voice. Last night I was very rude to you." She was chewing the words as if saying this wasn't easy for her. "I made a mistake." Julia Johnson placed a hand on her head with an affectionate smile. "It's okay, daughter. Everyone makes mistakes. But if you realize it, that is a very big thing." Lara looked at her in surprise. There was no anger on her face, just a mother-like softness and affection. Julia Johnson signaled Sarah and stood up. "Come on, daughter, rest a bit after breakfast. You endured a lot yesterday." Saying this, she left with Sarah while Lara sat uneasily in her place. A few moments later, she clumsily gathered the plate and, averting her eyes, quickly left the kitchen. Time crawled by. A week passed. During this time, she remained in a very strange state. A pale yellow light filled the room, and Lara sat on the sofa cracking her knuckles. A week had passed, but there was no sign of Henry Johnson. He came, sure, but he didn't bother to look at her or talk to her. Everything was going fine in the mansion. Too fine. Julia Johnson was nice, Sarah too. The people here didn't treat her badly. But this very thing was starting to bug her. Such silence and a peaceful life felt strange to her. The clock on the wall announced 10 o'clock. She took a long breath and began cursing herself. What have I become coming here? I'm dying of boredom. Just then, the door opened and Henry entered. He walked with his specific rigid stride. And as his gaze fell on Lara, his brows furrowed slightly. Lara jumped up as soon as she saw him, like a cat ready upon seeing prey. Finally, you remembered me, she said sarcastically. Henry cast a cursory glance at her, then walked toward the closet without replying. By the way, what kind of husband are you? You don't even ask how your wife is doing. It's been 7 whole days. She spoke rapidly, as if wanting to get all her complaints out in one breath. She was deliberately teasing him. Henry took off his coat with annoyance and threw it aside. Then, completely ignoring her, he went straight into the washroom. Lara's mouth fell open. Oh, so that's how it is. Now even when I'm speaking, he can't hear. She stomped her feet, came to the bed and sat down in frustration. What an arrogant man, she muttered to herself. Shortly after, Henry came out of the washroom, wearing a white t-shirt and black pajama pants. A towel was in his hand, and his face held that same traditional hardness. Lara stood up immediately. Now you can hear, right? Or are you still deaf? She spoke mockingly. Henry cast a glance at her and walked quietly toward the bed as if she were completely unnecessary. Don't ignore me, Lara said angrily. I am talking to you. Henry placed the towel aside with annoyance and glared at her with red eyes, as if he was fed up with her excessive chatter. Let me rest. Just saying that, he lay down on the bed. Lara's eyes widened with shock and anger. Really? That easily? She took a deep breath and came close to him. Look, if I am here, at least notice me. I am not something that dissolves into thin air. She was irritated now. This silence was stinging her. Henry closed his eyes as if he wasn't listening at all. Seeing this, Lara's anger reached its peak. She picked up a pillow and threw it at him. Henry opened his eyes and cast a deep, predatory look at her. If you want to stay safe, be quiet and move aside. His tone was so dangerous that for a moment Lara's heart trembled. But she immediately composed herself. Or else, what will you do? Eat me. She wasn't one to back down. She was just like that. Until she fought with someone, her food wouldn't digest. Henry cast a glance at her as if he had no interest in her words and closed his eyes again. Lara stomped her feet in anger and went to sit in the other corner of the room. This man will be killed by my hands one day, she muttered through gritted teeth, while Henry, smiling silently, had closed his eyes. Today, he had come back home only at his mother's behest. His mother had told him, "Your wife is starting to miss you. Come back, restart life. How long will you embrace a sorrow? We have to move forward. Johnsons aren't this weak." And now, he was deliberately testing her, deliberately teasing her so she would initiate. And as they say, when a woman wants to begin a relationship, she drops everything. And this time, Lara was in the same state. Silence filled the room. Only the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. Lara took a deep breath, stomped over, and sat on the edge of the bed. Henry's nonchalant attitude, his constant attempt to ignore her, was making her furiously angry. She had already served a week of silent punishment. She couldn't tolerate it anymore. "Why are you ignoring me?" she asked in a hard tone, but Henry gave no answer. However, this time, there was softness dissolved in her tone. Lara began calling his name, but he remained silent. Lara gritted her teeth and suddenly grabbed his hand. Henry looked up with a jerk. A spark of surprise flashed in his eyes. "I am your wife," Lara said in suppressed anger, but there was something else in her eyes. "You left for a week, and now you're behaving as if I am nothing." Henry took a deep breath. Then slowly, he let go of her hand, grabbed her wrist and pulled her toward him. If you're a wife, then claim your right. He spoke in a composed but deep tone. Lara's breath caught. She lowered her head silently. This was a moment, a decisive instant where she left her stubbornness and pride behind on her own. Relationships aren't built by running away. She understood this truth fully now. Relationships require love and bending, and she had bent herself toward this relationship. Without force, without coercion. Henry looked gently into her lowered eyes, as if reading her thoughts. I forgave you the very day my mother explained to me that if I oppress you, tomorrow my daughter will be oppressed too, and I don't want that. His tone was unexpectedly soft. But I wanted you to understand this relationship yourself, to accept it yourself. Lara raised her head. There was a new color in her eyes. Remorse, forgiveness, and something else that perhaps Henry himself couldn't understand yet. Forgive me. She spoke softly. Henry smiled slightly, a lively, handsome smile that appeared very rarely on his hard face. Forgiveness is the greatest right, Lara. He spoke softly. Lara lowered her eyes. Her heart felt light as if a burden inside had been lifted. This was life's greatest lesson. Relationships are won not by ego, but by forgiveness.